Good afternoon. I hope everybody's doing well today. This is actually the third take of this video. Um, Whenever you have a situation where you're working in an office, there's always lots of things that happen, and that's truly been the case today. So hopefully we get this one in. But hope everybody's doing well this week. I wanted to kind of give a little bit of a very brief intro, and I won't take long for this video, but to date, when we've learned about supplies, and in particular, we've learned about inventory, we know that the way that we have made the initial purchase, for these types of items would be with cash, for example. And in that situation, you would have a credit to cash for the amount of the purchase, and then a debit to your supplies or your inventory or whatever the case may be. And at that point in time, we haven't recognized any expense. We've given up one asset in exchange for another that will later be used in production, and so we're all good there. But then we do find at the end of the period, whenever we get ready to make our adjusting entries, that's when we recognize the expense, and that's where we're going to, of course, true up the value of inventory or supplies relative to what's physically on hand. And we get into that a little bit this week, but at that point in time, that's where you're going to adjust your supplies, credit your supplies for the amount of the adjustment, and then the amount of the adjustment is going to represent your expense during the period. But to date, we've really kind of assumed that that's a flat number. Okay, that the purchases and things that may have occurred in a period really have the same value as far as that goes. And in life, that's not really the case. If you go and look in any given month, for instance, it's very unlikely that you'll go to a gas station, as an example. And if you were to drive by the same station every day, it's very unlikely that you'll see that same cost every day of the month. There's just fluctuations that happen. And as those things happen, if you follow that out, as my expenses fluctuate or as my purchases fluctuate, that's going to have an effect on my margin, would it not? You're going to have as expenses, as those, particularly those variable expenses, increase, even incrementally, that's going to have an incremental increase or decrease on the amount of your margin, which has an incremental or increase or decrease on your break even. And so that's one consideration. The other thing of it is too is we really need to look at how inventory is flowing in our particular system. So as an example, we've got a couple of methods. We can do kind of a weighted average method, and that smooths out some of those price fluctuations, and that can be a benefit to us, particularly in modeling and that type of thing. But then we have what we call FIFO, which is first in, first out. And that means that the inventory that you purchased first is going to be the first that goes out. So you're essentially, for lack of better terms, your oldest purchases are going to be the ones that are going to be used in production first. They're going to leave your place of employment faster than your more recent purchases. And if you think about that, then a lot of things being held constant, prices have a tendency to rise. So when that happens, you're more likely to take advantage of older costs and that type of thing that might happen, which tend to be a little lower, although not necessarily. LIFO, which is the preferred method, is that the IRS prefers, or the IRS requires actually, that we use, is last in, first out. And so an example of that might be when you go to a grocery store and you purchase milk, or you purchase, those types of consumable goods. And what was the first thing you do? You look at the expiration date, and you don't look at the expiration date that has the closest occurring. You look at the one that's the farthest out. So today is the 21st of February. So if I went to a grocery store and I saw in the rows kind of farther back an expiration date of 2/25, and then I look at the ones closest to me and I see 2/28, I'm and everything else held constant, I'm likely to use the one that says 2/28, because I would have the fear that I might run into that 2/25 sooner and then have a situation where I've got inventory, or I've got, in this case, milk that I couldn't use. So that's really kind of how that process goes. We've got, in the LIFO method, those more recent items are the ones that are going to leave us first. In the FIFO method, those older items are the ones that are going to leave us first. And there's a lot of considerations with that we'll study in depth in this chapter, and then of course in subsequent chapters you'll learn about. Certainly, if you think about the LIFO method, for instance, if your oldest inventory is the inventory that's hanging around the longest, then you've got other considerations. You've got to store that. You've got to decide, is that going to eventually become obsolete? Is that going to be something that gets damaged or stolen or whatever else? If it's hanging around, if only the more recent items are the ones that actually leave you. So there's a number of different considerations that kind of go along with this chapter, but I wanted to just kind of frame that a little bit for this week's initial thoughts and just give you something to kind of consider as you're working through this. And we'll get a chance, you'll have a chance to study and look at a weighted average costing. You'll see that as well. But again, that has the effect of smoothing out those costs a little bit and giving you a more average number. But anyway, I hear the phone ringing again, so I'm going to jump off. Have a great afternoon, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye now.